Hi guys, I would like to welcome you in the next part of my podcast Lepiej, Teraz. This time it's in English. It's very surprising for you, for me as well, because my guest is a foreigner, is an American.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hi, it's great to be on the show. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
His name is Sam Cook. Sam is an ex-US Army officer, a West Point graduate, and maybe Sam will tell the story how I got to you, okay?
Okay.
So it will be much better for the people to get to know you. I was doing the show before the meeting with you with Patrick Ney. He's a British guy living in Poland, and he's a blogger, the most famous British blogger writing blog in Polish, as he calls himself. And he told me that he's got a mentor, and I asked him, why you have a mentor? Why you need a mentor? He said, Radek, you should try it too also, because it's amazing to have a mentor. And I asked him how much it costs. He told me. I was shocked. So I decided I must know this person. He told me your name. He gave me the contact. So basically I'm really thankful that you agreed to be part of my podcast.
Well, it's great to be on here, and thank you again for starting podcasting in Poland. I think I've been doing a little bit of it in English, but it's great to see it take off in English, and also, take off in Polish, and also, interviewing Patty, who's a great guest, and someone I think who can really help the Polish marketing community, podcasting community a lot. So.
I really appreciate because that he introduced you to me, because I started making research about you, and the more I was reading and listening about you, I found out that you're also a podcaster. You are not only mentor, you're a teacher, you're an entrepreneur, trumpet player.
Long time ago.
And you're a very qualified, high qualified negotiator, I must say, storyteller. And I have some information about you. I gather you're also a TEDx speaker, because I saw your speech that you gave to TEDx Kazimierz about how to discover your life art. Yes,
mm-hmm.
That's how you can call it in English.
Life's work, just what you should be doing with your life, which I think's a lot easier to say than to actually do. Is find out what's your best gift and talent to offer the world, and actually be able to do it and get paid to do it, which is the hard part.
So maybe I will start from the first question, and the first question is, how did you end up in Poland? Because it's very interesting. I listened to some podcasts with you, because I see on the internet that you are quite famous guest on American podcasts. And the more I was listening, the more interesting stories I could take from this podcast. I never realized I will start making notes, and it will grow to storytelling, networking, podcasting, mentoring, and the stories that you told are amazing. You can simply write a book about it. Are you planning to write a book?
Well. I actually am in the business of promoting authors, people who have books and I guess you'd say information to share. My passion is in education and publishing, so I guess I'm too busy helping other people who are doing that to write books or do some of my own stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I'm passionate about teaching and things like that. But I guess I've always felt like you have to live a life worth writing about or sharing before you get to that point. So short answer, nothing's on the horizon. Long answer, I don't know. Ask me a little bit later. But I guess your original question was how did I get to Poland? And if you would have told me 3 years ago when I left the Army, exactly almost 3 years ago.
You left the Army 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago. If you'd have told me I would end up living in Poland, I would have told you you're crazy, because I'd never thought about living in Poland. But I left the Army 3 years ago after a 13-and-a-half-year career as an officer. And before that, in the U.S. Army, before that, I was a cadet at West Point, where for 4 years we were training to be officers. We wore uniforms and went to university, but we were, really acting like soldiers the whole time. So for about 17 years, I was institutionalized in a big, large organization called the United States Army. And I had this strong desire when I left the Army to travel. I had traveled in the Army. I'd gotten to live in Germany, so while I was living in Germany on the weekends, I would travel all over Western Europe. When I lived in Germany, I went to almost every Western country in Europe, and this was in 2001 to 3, but I never went east of Prague. I never thought anything of the East, never thought it was worth seeing. Just my idea was, well, there's nothing there. And then that kind of changed a little bit, because as I was teaching, or in the Army, I got asked to go back after 8 years to go teach history at West Point, and they asked me, do you want to teach the cadets about Chinese history or Russian history? And since in my undergraduate studies I studied German history and European history and lived in Germany and traveled all over Western Europe, I thought, well, I might as well figure out what Russia is all about and what is to the east of what I've been studying. So my New York years were spent in the Slavic Studies department for 2 years studying history.
Which year it was?
2008 to 10, I was studying Russian history, and then from 2010 to 13 in the U.S. Army at West Point, the military academy, I was teaching Russian history.
So you've been studying during service in the army, yes?
Yeah.
Because after you came back from Iraq, yes?
Yeah, so after I came back from Iraq, I probably got the best job you can get in the United States Army, which is teaching cadets. And for 2 years before I started teaching cadets, I was studying in New York City. And the only thing I had to do in New York City was study. And it was actually during this time that I was really bored, because studying at graduate school after you've spent 90 to 100 hours of work a week in Iraq just feels like a big letdown. So I had to figure out something to fill my time. I didn't have a family at the time, so I decided to start a business. I was starting a tour company in New York City, got really into that, but realized that what I really loved about the business was the internet and the marketing side of things and the deal making, rather than actually giving the tours. So I decided to get out of the business of giving tours and into the business of going into business. I probably missed the thrill of being responsible for something with some risk. And the business world in New York City, obviously you're risking different things, money versus lives and other things like that, but it felt like I'd been kind of born for entrepreneurship. And one of the things I realized looking back in my Army career was the times that I did really well as an officer was when I had almost no guidance and a lot of room to experiment as a leader of an organization. When I was in a staff job where I had a lot of guidance and someone was telling me exactly what to do and to help them, I wasn't that great as a staff officer. So I realized around the time I was in New York City preparing to teach at West Point that the next 10 years, 15 years in the Army that I could have done were not going to make me happy. And because I knew that that wouldn't make me happy, staying in the Army, doing staff jobs that I probably wasn't the best person to do anyway. There were better officers than me out there who could do those. I just felt like it was time for me to leave and to do something else. And that was kind of a real period of me trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And that's when I kind of married my passion for entrepreneurship with my study of history and my love of storytelling and ideas and communication. And I just realized that in business I love marketing. I love the story part of online marketing, and in my life I'm a big history person and love storytelling. So I thought, well, this is much closer to what I want to be doing with my life, and let me get out and kind of exercise my, what I felt was my true gifts in life was entrepreneurship and storytelling. So I got out of the Army and I wanted to travel because I'd never had the freedom to travel freely in the Army. You know, when you go to Iraq, you see a lot of interesting things, but you're also bounded by lots of rules. Being inside of the Army,
like trying to stay alive.
Yeah, like trying to stay alive, staying in a uniform, staying in an armored vehicle, things like that. So I just decided to travel. And while I was traveling all around the world, I kind of would go between the United States, Asia, and Australia, and a little bit of Europe. And at the time, I had an outsourced team in the Philippines. I had a team in the Philippines, and I realized whenever I went to visit my team in the Philippines that I got a lot done. We built personal relationships. I
heard this story.
Yeah,
I need to tell it by myself because listen to me. I did podcasts before about digital nomading, about people being entrepreneurs using remote workers. This guy is the only guy that I know that is using the remote workforce, that he's going there and meeting them, shaking their hands and talking to them. It's amazing. How did he end up doing it?
Well, I think it's a simple principle of when you work with someone remotely and then you go meet them, the entire relationship changes. And this is just something very simple I learned in the Army, personal relationships matter, and leadership, a lot of it is about personal relationships. And people who you outsource to, I think we tend to think of them as just some interchangeable part, but they're really
just cheap force.
Yeah,
you respected those people. It's amazing. Yeah. Where did you learn this? In the Army?
Well, in the Army, you get a lot more out of your soldiers, I found, when you spent time with them. So in the Army, you'd have your soldiers who would be the junior soldiers, and they'd be in the motor pool changing the tank track and doing a lot of hard work. Well, when you were in charge of them, if you would spend 3-4 hours working alongside of them, doing the work, getting to know them, talking to them, you'd see different results. You'd see different levels of motivation, levels of loyalty and things like that. So my idea when I had a remote workforce was be the guy that visited them. And the people I knew in the Philippines that worked for me told me that they'd never had any outsourced bosses come visit them. Yeah, they were shocked, and I actually quite enjoyed it. But while when I went to the Philippines, one of the things I realized was I missed the interpersonal part of leadership that I had done in the Army for so long. I also realized that you get a lot more done, and when you leave, the loyalty and the productivity of the team actually goes up when you leave, because even though you're not there, they still remember you, and you're a real person to them rather than some distant digital plantation owner, I guess you'd call
ATM machine.
Exactly, yeah.
PayPal.
Exactly. And then, but one of the things I realized while I was traveling was the digital nomad life sounds really, really cool. But one of the big disadvantages to digital nomad is two things. One is you always feel like you never have a routine because you're always in a different place. Now you can implement a routine and do the same things no matter where you are, but I found that you're not nearly as productive when you travel the first day or two when you get somewhere, and you lose a lot of productivity. And I remember really enjoying my trips to Europe, and when I was sitting in this English pub right by this beautiful port of Lisbon, and I didn't spend any time while I was there going to the beach or doing anything, and I had really bad Wi-Fi. I remember sitting there and saying to myself, why am I going to all these cool places when all I'm doing is working in bad pubs with bad Wi-Fi, and I'm not even seeing the cool places that I came to see? And at that point, I just realized, I would like to make a life. I'd like to have community. I'd like to have a workforce that I can see and work with every day, because I just knew that would make me much more productive. The problem was, and I love my old team in the Philippines still, and if they ever hear this, I hope they don't take this personally, but I just didn't want to live in the Philippines. That to me was not where I wanted to live long term.
Typhoons.
Yeah. Well, it's not that. So I started to think about going to the United States, and I obviously gone to school in New York City, and there were some other options in the United States. And I almost did that, but then while I was in Budapest for the summer, I was hanging out in Budapest, and I met a really nice girl from Poland who I hung out with, and she, for a few days, we had a great time, and we didn't know if we were going to have a relationship, but she said, hey, you should come to Poland.
So again, Polish girl.
Yeah, exactly. It's always. So she said, you should come to Poland, and I went to Poland to visit her, and I remember coming to Warsaw, and then, we hung out for about a day, and then she said, I'm busy this week, I don't really have time to hang out, and I thought, well, that's really nice of you to invite me here, and then not had a lot of time, and just kind of realized, well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with her. I went down to Krakow for about a week, and then I came back. And on my way back out of Poland, I visited the Uprising Museum in Warsaw, and I was really kind of inspired by the spirit of Polish people. I thought they were very nice. I don't know why, but maybe a lot nicer than the people I met in Budapest and other places. And it really just kind of struck me that Poland and Polish people are very educated, very well trained in digital design. I was very impressed talking to my host in Krakow about how much talent there was in Poland in terms of designers, developers, and it just kind of all clicked where I said, well, I'm looking for a place, but I don't necessarily want to go to the United States. I love Europe. I lived 9 years as a child in Belfast, and I also lived...
You were Ireland.
Yeah, my father's English, and I was born in Belfast, so I had a UK passport. After I left the army, I was able to get my UK citizenship so I could live in the EU, which who knows how worthwhile that is now. But I just really it just really clicked to me that I wanted to be living somewhere that I felt culturally comfortable in, that obviously was not too different than the United States and my European sensibilities. And Poland just kind of really clicked. I felt this spirit, and the more I researched Polish history and understood the long tradition in Poland, which I didn't really even know about that much, of elected kings,
yes.
And the pro-Polish or the pro-Western attitude of Polish people, which to me was very surprising, given that the way the United States and England has somehow let Poland down throughout history, that they're still very positive towards U.S. and U.K. And it all just kind of clicked for me, and I said, well, this is where I want to try and start a business. And the more I look at the East, I like to say the East is the new West. For 400 years, Europeans, especially from Eastern Europe, have been going west all the way out to San Francisco in the United States, which is kind of like the symbol, even today, of gold rush. Silicon Valley in the 1840s, the literal gold rush where people were mining gold. And that's where people are going. And now if you look at the west of the United States, it's very, very expensive, $3,000-$4,000, which is more than most Polish people make in a month just for a small apartment in San Francisco. Things are getting very, very pricey. And
right now, currently.
Oh, yeah. In the United States and California, it's very expensive, especially in San Francisco. And for the price of what you pay for an apartment, you can hire a couple of really talented developers in Poland and actually build a product. So it just kind of struck me that the opportunity in Poland from a development design perspective, which are really the building blocks of wealth creation in the digital age, was so talented and well priced that Poland was a great place. And some people say, well, oh yeah, Poland's just great for the prices. Well, no, there's actually a lot cheaper labor in the East than some of the places in Malaysia or Philippines or other places. But to me, it was really about the value, which is the quality and the price together really makes Poland a compelling option. So I just think that the smart people in the United States in the tech world are starting to realize it. Some very, very early signs of venture capital companies and some other tech digital nomads like myself who are starting to put down roots. I wouldn't call myself a digital nomad anymore because I don't travel much, but starting
Settled.
I've kind of, I call myself an expat or an immigrant in Poland, and they're starting to come here, and some are coming and going back. A lot of them have Polish roots, some of them don't, but you're starting to see it, and I would predict in the next 5 to 10 years you'll see a lot more Americans come over to Eastern Europe, specifically Poland and the Warsaw, Krakow scene, and really try and get ahead of what I think is a very promising future in Eastern Europe for wealth creation, building value, building valuable products, valuable teams, and
I think you noticed this by establishing the podcast, Project Kazimierz. It's about Polish spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation, yes?
Yeah, so Project Kazimierz was after I moved to Poland. I met with a local entrepreneur, Richard Lucas, who'd been in Poland for 25 years. I mean, I call myself...
He speaks Polish.
Yeah. Richard has Polish children. He married a lady from Poland, has children who speak Polish and English, and he's one of the guys that way before people like me came to Poland really set down roots, like right in the wild 90s of Polish history, where nothing was established. Capitalism was brand new. He set down roots and built some very valuable businesses, and he was kind of like a patron of the community down in Krakow to build this tech startup scene there. So we just decided to partner up, have a podcast, sit down and chat weekly, and talk to famous or should be famous entrepreneurs and influencers in Poland. And I just found that very educational to sit down and talk to people who'd been part of this scene and built great startups in Poland.
It's a great piece of information. I recommend you guys to download, to use it on your mobile phones. Project Kazimierz, and it's really nice interviews you can listen under.
And they're obviously done in English, so they're. But yeah, I think it's really. I think it's good inspiration for people in Poland to hear other entrepreneurs who are noticed on the international tech scene, and that's kind of what we're trying to do in the podcast, is build an audience. We have downloads in the United States and UK and Vietnam's actually a strong community, because there's a Vietnamese community here in Poland that's small in Warsaw, but there's a lot of downloads back in Vietnam of our show, which is interesting. I think that's like the 4th or 5th largest download city, or country. So yeah, I think it's good for entrepreneurs in Poland to listen to the show, and thanks again for bringing that up, and invite anyone listening to join us at projectkazimierz.com.
I like it because there's one interview with the podcaster. Yes, so I like it.
Yeah, well, we did at the beginning of every season. We try and do a season, episode 1 and 21. We sit down and Richard and I kind of talk about what we've been up to lately. Episode 1 was when I just got into Poland and was launching the show. Episode 21 was really interesting because it was right after I had shut down a business that I'd originally moved to Poland to set down a team, and it hadn't worked out. And I was actually talked to Richard about recording a show right after I shut down a business, say this is what it feels like. It doesn't feel good. There's a stigma towards failure in Poland that I wanted to address in my show, that was just talking about what it's like to not make it in business, and how that's okay to not make it, and one of the, I think, the great strengths of the United States system of entrepreneurship is this recognition that when you aren't successful in a business and you have to shut it down, that's okay. And in Poland, there's a bit more of, right now at least, a stigma towards people who aren't successful in business, and so that, I think, inhibits a little bit of the risk taking that some people need to do to make it. And obviously risk taking, there's downside of risk, which is more failure.
So there's like labeling, you're a loser or something.
Yeah, and I don't try to idealize or romanticize failure. I don't think it's good to fetishize it like some people in the United States do, where they say, oh, fail fast, fail often, love failure. I don't like to go that far, but I do like to say that the greatest periods of growth, if you put your mind to it and decide to do it, can come when you don't make it. And it's not fun. It's not cool when businesses go under and there's no money left to pay the bills. That's not fun, and you have to deal with the consequences of failure. But the growth and the learning and the new opportunities that come out of that are can be quite powerful, and if you let it happen. So that's kind of how I got from Krakow to Warsaw. I decided after my first business didn't work out that I was going to move up to Warsaw and start over in a new city, but still in Poland. And here I am sitting with you. That's a great podcast. So.
I really appreciate this. I must say that you completely destroyed my plan of questions. I prepared the question because you said something that struck me. I need to go back to Iraq a little bit because Sam said something about having respect, and I can see by his life, and he's showing respect to people he's meeting on his way. And he showed respect to these remote workers in Philippines, and he showed respect to people he negotiated surrender. In Salahuddin, yes, province.
Salahuddin province.
Province in the north. Now, by the way, taken by Daesh.
Yeah.
It's fuckers Daesh. I don't call them ISIS.
I'm very impressed with your knowledge of Iraq, actually, because I was my second tour in Iraq. I was in Salahuddin province. And
there's Tal-Afar next to Mosul, south from Mosul.
Yeah. So my first tour I was in Mosul and Tal-Afar, which is under, as of right now, which is still under control of Daesh, which is the Islamic State of Iraq. And in my second tour I was in Salahuddin, which is about.
Because Saladin was born there, that's why they call it Salahuddin.
The great Saladin,
yes. The conqueror of Crusaders.
the great fighter of Western Crusaders. He was. So I was based in Saladin province, and one of the things we did in Iraq was, our job was to restore security to the Iraqi people, and one of the things we came up with in our area was to not necessarily need to fight in order to do that. So we came up with a negotiation plan and a surrender program for some of the people who maybe were tired of fighting us.
It was Al-Kaida basically.
Actually, it's interesting. We call it Al-Kaida, but there was Al-Qaeda in Iraq, but also there's the Islamic State. And the Islamic State, as it's known right now, which is more famous than Al-Qaeda right now, was a startup, I guess you'd call it, in Iraq in 2007. And we used to read the intelligence reports, and they'd talk about this Islamic State, the secret Islamic State of Iraq.
I'll tell you something interesting now, because now our camera will finish, so I have to change, okay? So.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You said something about Battle of Tal-Afar in some interviews, yes?
Yes.
You took part in this battle, your soldiers fought there, yes?
Well, I was in the Battle of Tal-Afar, which was 2005. I would not say that I took part, meaning I was a staff officer at the time.
Not 2007?
2005 was my first tour in Iraq. I was there twice. Okay. 2005 was the Battle of Tal-Afar, and when you say took part, I'd say yes, I was there. Yes, I went out during that time and was involved, but I wasn't on the front lines. I was a staff officer. So my job was to follow around the colonel, who was in charge of 5,000 U.S. soldiers, Iraqi police and army, and coordinating all of those people.
Colonel McMaster.
Colonel McMaster, who was
3-star general.
3-star general, yeah, who was an amazing leader, and it. What I got to see in the Battle of Tal-Afar was like a bird's eye view of history in the making, and being a historian, I very much appreciated that at the time. And also, so I didn't do anything to affect the outcome of that battle at all. I was just a fly on the wall watching a great guy.
So basically the battle was about that insurgents, they took over the city after you left. Yes, they took over the whole summer, and in the September you came back and you took it back, and a lot of soldiers died. And I checked it on Wikipedia before I came to the interview, and I saw that Yeah, they were like Sunni. Everybody knows it's Sunni in the north. Yes.
Well, Tal-Afar was actually mixed between Sunni and Shia in the middle of a Sunni area, so it was a very interesting city.
It's interesting because I checked Polish Wikipedia. It shows that it's Mahdi army.
Mahdi army was, there were some Shia.
Assad.
Yeah,
Polish soldiers fought them in Karbala.
Yeah. Well, the Polish soldiers who were in the south were fighting the Shias who also had connections in our area. So yeah, there was when you go to Iraq, there's a lot of tribal politics.
And you've been there. You've been there inside, and I want you to tell something because I started question about networking, and you then we came to the being respectful to the people that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
You respected your workers, and you respected also enemies. Can you tell a story how it was?
Well, you know, when you're fighting someone, sometimes you just have to understand where they're coming from, and I think in war throughout history, soldiers who are not at the high level making the decisions sometimes have a begrudging respect for each other and try not to take things personally. And one of the things I just realized was these are real people on the other side who have a different viewpoint. And I always like to tell the American soldiers, if we came to a foreign country and if China or some foreign power came to our country, what would we do? And we would fight them. And I know in Poland, if a foreign power comes into Poland, you guys fight them very well. I mean, obviously, in the history of Poland is one of resistance to foreign occupying powers. So I just like to put myself in the shoes of the other people. And when I did that and talked to my soldiers about it, I said, you know, what is our goal here? Our goal is to make the United States successful. And how do we be successful? We make the new Iraqi government successful. And how do we make the new Iraqi government successful? We get the people to support them. And do we need to kill people just to make people support the new government? Actually, probably that's counterproductive. Now, there are some people who are against the new government who need to be fought. But if there are people who are willing to stop fighting and support the new government, who we were fighting, maybe that's worth doing. So that was just my idea. And it worked to some extent in our area. We were able to negotiate a surrender with these people, and
you've been talking face to face with the leader. What was his name? Sarhan.
And the funny story about Sarhan is after we left 2 years ago, I found out that Sarhan, who was now out of prison because we'd arrested him while we were there. Or he turned himself into us, actually.
He blew up this cars with American soldiers. And
he was in charge, and actually I think is in charge of the town that I used to be in control of. So
it's your buddy now.
Yeah, well, the guy that I was talking to and negotiating with helped organize the surrender and actually turned himself in. But you know, after a couple of years, started fighting again. So was that successful while we were there? Yes. Was it long-term successful if he goes out and starts fighting again? I don't know. But the point that I like to make to my soldiers was we were there to accomplish a mission, and we left in 2010 from Iraq. The United States government, as a result of what the soldiers had done, had been broadly successful. Now that was lost. It was let's say thrown away a bit by not maintaining a presence in Iraq, and the Islamic State came back in and unfortunately took over that area. But that's where we're at right now, and who knows what's going to happen in the long term in Iraq and what the overall effect will be. But I just like to focus while I was there on accomplishing the mission I had, which was to keep carry out the government's objectives, and at the same time, keep your soldiers safe as possible and make it out of their lives. So that's what we did. And you talk about respect, and I don't think I'm at all perfect in that realm. I'm sure some employees who've worked for me have think that I work them really, really hard, and sometimes maybe if not always.
I'm talking negotiations.
Oh yeah, of course, in negotiations, but
empathy, all these skills you need to feel, you be in the shoes of your opponent, let's call it.
Yeah, and I think the art of influence in leadership or negotiations, where you're in business deals or negotiating with other people, is to understand where the other person's coming from and what they want to achieve, and then seeing if you can move your objectives and their objectives together in some kind of a win-win situation. And that's the same thing you do with people who work for you, is you try and create a situation where they benefit if the company benefits, and versus making it an adversarial type relationship. So that's the goal in any human interaction.
I would like to go now to storytelling, because also in Iraq you show that storytelling can help in getting to your goals. Yes, what was the letter that you wrote? Famous letter that made your colonel. Yes, your mentor. He was your mentor.
Well, there's a story that about I think it was Gary Halbert or one of these marketing guys said there's never there's not a problem in the world that a good sales letter cannot solve. And I guess I put that to the test in Iraq. Was we had just moved into the local area, and we were going out on missions every night, and going on raids and trying to capture people who were fighting us, and being very aggressive, and that was the way we operated. But my executive officer, who's my assistant, Captain Matt McKee at the time, was his job was to assist me, and I was out doing all the missions, and he was taking care of the logistics and the fuel and all the boring stuff that the commander doesn't want to deal with. And we noticed when we went into a local neighborhood, we did a raid because we were looking for some guys that were a threat to us and the local population, and we were searching these houses for a number of hours. And afterwards, a guy came up to us to the gate, and he gave us a letter, and he says, "Please deliver this to the commander." Now, the letter was put in my box, and my executive officer, my assistant, reads it and decides, gets it translated and says, "Wow, this is very interesting." He told us what his concerns were and how the operations that we'd done had affected other people. And he said, "Well, I think we should write a letter back to this guy." And I said, "Well, Matt, I don't have time. We're doing more important stuff." And he decided to write a letter for me. And he said, "Well, how about I write the letter and then we translate it and send it to him?" And so this guy, my executive officer, came up with the idea, wrote the letter, and said, "Well, thank you for your feedback. Here's what we understand about what you said. Maybe next time we'll do things this way, and this way. The kids didn't get to school on time. People missed work because we were doing this operation, and we're sorry about that, but here's why we did it." We weren't saying, we won't do that again. We're just saying, here's why we did it. This is just explaining. It was simple communication. And the guy came back to the gate with tears in his eyes, saying, "Oh, I can't believe you guys wrote me back." It's a simple gesture of taking the time to write him back and address his concerns. And
it was one of the local tribal
leaders. One of the local leaders of the village that was right next to our base. And what really struck me about that was the idea that when you're in a position of power, and we were obviously extremely powerful, the most powerful organization there, taking the time to communicate with people can have a big impact. So after that, my first sergeant, Michael Livingston at the time, he came up to me and said, that letter was really powerful. He said, "You're a really good writer, and I've seen you write, and you should sit down and write a letter. Why don't you write a letter and address it to all the people and in the local area?" And this was back in 2007. Facebook hadn't obviously reached the Middle East at that point. Twitter, there was nothing like that. And he said, "Just write a letter to local people."
That's on a piece of paper,
Yeah, like typed a letter. Okay. And I typed.
Copy machine.
Well, here the funny part was I typed a letter, and I said to the guy who, the translator, who had his degree in English literature, he studied Shakespeare from Baghdad University. He translated the letter for me. So I think whatever I wrote was probably made to sound even better in Arabic than it should have, because my translator was a brilliant writer in Arabic. But basically what I did was I just wrote an argument for our position. And it was quite simple. It said,
why are you there? Yes.
Yeah, it said why we're here. Look, we're here in Iraq. We understand that as a local population, you're not that happy that a foreign power is occupying you, which I think is important to acknowledge, because a lot of Americans had the idea that we're here to bring you freedom and why aren't you thankful, which is probably not the best attitude to take. And we said, and we said, hey, we're here to help restore security. We understand that America's made mistakes, which is a big acknowledgement, because we had made mistakes there, and obviously 4 years after the invasion we're still there. We hadn't done things perfectly. And I said, but trust me, we don't want to be here any more than you don't want us here, but we're here to fix the mistakes that were made. We're here to provide security by helping your government get back on its feet. And the quickest way for us to go home and you guys to get your respect back is to support the new government, not the United States, but the new government, because the new government is for you and they're going to stay with you, and we're here to help them, and then we're going to leave. I just made the argument that the people, the Islamic State and the other people, don't want that. They want chaos, they want their own ulterior objectives, and that was just it. And I said in the letter all the things that I'd been hearing my mentor, Colonel McMaster, in the last tour in the Battle of Tal-Afar say to people over and over again in meetings, and it was just a very concise summary on one page of what the argument was for us to be there and to do our job. And it was quite interesting, because when I gave this letter in Arabic to the local chief of police and the tribal leaders and the army commander, the chief of police got quite emotional. Actually, Colonel Ali, who I'd been a bit distant with since I got there, he didn't really trust Americans that much. He'd seen a lot of commanders come and go. And he said, I can't believe you guys really took the time to write this in our language, translated of course, and understand who we are and where we're coming from. The letter, I guess you call it, went viral. He instructed his chief of police, his bodyguard, to go make copies of it, and they photocopied it, and then they went out and gave it to the imams at the mosque, and the imams at all the local mosques had copies of it, and they were actually reading it over the call to prayer, so it gets read to the local population that can't read over loudspeakers. And
what was the outcome of this?
Well, it's hard to say what the outcome was, but I know that months later, people came up to me and they had copies of the letter that they'd received, and they still brought it out, and they said, thank you for the letter that you wrote me, as if I'd written it to them, which made me laugh, because I had not written it to that one person, but he felt like it had been. And I think the letter had a huge role in spurring the local community leaders that took the initiative to help me negotiate the mass kind of surrender of people who'd been fighting us. And I think without that letter, that probably wouldn't have happened. There would have been more violence, probably more lives lost on both sides. So I think it just demonstrated to me the principle that, like Gary Halbert did say, there's nothing in the world that a powerful sales letter cannot solve. There's no, letters are ideas, and war fundamentally is about ideas. And if you think about war, it's an argument that turned violent on a massive global scale. And in World War II, that was a huge argument between fascism and communism and democracy, and there were some weird alliances in that whole thing. And the Cold War was an argument between communism and democracy. The two things were left standing after fascism fell, and that argument was resolved. And obviously Poland now is part of that winning side, you'd say, maybe in the European Union and the democratic side that did it. So that's really the lesson I took from that whole thing, was the the power of ideas and communication rules everything.
And storytelling also.
Yeah.
Storytelling.
Well, yeah, and telling a story. People like to ask me, what was it like in Iraq? And it wasn't all shooting all the time. In fact, there were very few instances of shooting. It was a lot of long days driving around in Humvees, going to meet people and sitting down and listening, and then telling our story. Listening to their story, telling our story.
Networking also.
Networking at the highest level with guns, and trying to get allies. Yeah, and that's what I viewed my job. I used to tell people I was like a politician with guns. I had a SWAT team with bodyguards,
Rangers,
who had snipers and
Apache,
helicopters and whatever I wanted. But that's kind of how I viewed myself, and I look at marketing right now and marketing in the digital age. If you look at what the Islamic State is doing in marketing, they're amazing at marketing, whether you love them or hate them. I'm obviously on the side that I hate them, but you have to respect what they're doing with.
You think they're creating sales funnels for these volunteers?
Oh man, they have an amazing
autoresponders.
They have an amazing sales funnel. They have these YouTube videos that are very, very well produced. They have music. They have recruiting networks that all is generated by
newsletters.
Newsletters. Yes. I mean, is all generated by their story. Now, their story to me is very seductive, but ultimately, I think it's the wrong story. So I think it's going to lose. But it certainly is powerfully attracting people. This idea that modern life is too materialistic. It's soft. It's not pure, it's not what it should be. And they actually have some very interesting critiques and points about the modern world in the West, and that's why it's so seductive to people who are in societies that are not as successful as the West. And it's even seductive to people in the West who are part of the West and feel disenfranchised or feel like they're not, is this all there is to life? And I think that that's a very, very interesting dynamic that I'm seeing is this idea of a narrative about the West versus the Islamic world and the stories that each side is telling. And you also see it in Russia versus the West too. I mean, Russia's critique of the West is a lot like the Islamic world's critique of the West, which is it's soft, it's liberal, it's against family values, and they've got all these cultural critiques of the West, and you see this huge propaganda machine in Russia.
We could see when they took Crimea away from Ukraine. So basically they demonized the Ukrainians as a fascist Nazis.
Yeah.
It was much easier for them to conquer.
Exactly, fascist, westernized,
NATO,
weak, liberal.
Yes.
No values, no traditional values, and that's it's a very interesting critique of the West, and I think it's something that the Western world cannot dismiss out of hand. You can't just say, oh, those Islamic State people are crazy, because they have some points, and in every lie there's some element of truth that draws people into it, and then the lie creates this big web of I think evil that needs to be defeated. But same thing with the Russia's propaganda versus the West, and it's hard to argue. And I've made this point talking to officers in the Western world. It's hard to argue that, ironically, the Western world, which is the godfather of marketing and advertising, it's hard to argue that we're winning the war of ideas against the Islamic State in Russia, because those civilizations are not nearly as powerful, not nearly as wealthy, not nearly as militarily, well established.
They're corrupted.
Yeah, but they are equalizing our power, which NATO is the most powerful alliance, the wealthiest, most powerful military alliance in history. They're able to equal or hold at bay that power, balance it with some very, very inexpensive, highly effective lies, but they're great stories, and people like to believe them. Yes. And so from a storytelling perspective, I'm very interested in the power and the dark side of what storytelling can do. I mean, you can, the greatest stories in many ways, the most powerful stories in a lot of ways are fantasy based and complete lies, but people like to believe them because they want to escape real life. So I think that's what I learned about the incident in Iraq, and seeing the power of storytelling in warfare is stories are the most powerful thing in the world, and the stories that we tell ourselves personally, the stories that countries tell themselves. Poland right now has stories that it's telling itself, and different political parties are telling different stories about the same thing that's happened in Polish history. Was solidarity good, or was it an evil, corrupt thing? There's all kinds of stories that I see going on in Poland that are very emotional, very divisive, and just to be aware and switched on wherever you are about the stories at every level of life that individuals, families, communities, cities, cultures, nations tell themselves is important to be aware of.
You remind me of my studies. I studied sociology at Warsaw University, and there was like a book of Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilizations.
Yes.
Do you believe in this scenario?
Well, I remember reading Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations back in the 90s, and a lot of people...
Me too.
Yeah, it was very controversial.
I'm older than you.
Yeah. Well, it was very controversial, and a lot of people thought that he was being sensationalist by saying the Clash of Civilizations. He basically said there's, I think, 7 main civilizations in the world.
Yes.
And there's the Russian one,
Islamic, and China.
Islamic, Chinese, the Latin one, the more European one, and he basically was saying that the future wars and conflicts are going to be based on the fault lines of these civilizations. And at the time, the Balkan wars were happening, which were on the fault lines of 3 major civilizations, which was the Russian Slavic Empire, the Islamic Turkish Empire, and then the Western, Croatia / the Western world, that all intersected in the Balkans. And a lot of people like to dismiss that and say that this is kind of quasi-racist to say this, but it's I think, unfortunately, that I don't want to give a value to his thesis or not, but what we're seeing in the past 20 years is, I think, a very, very strong validation of his thesis, which is there's a huge disconnect between different civilizations in this world right now, and that's where fault lines are lying. The Western world, I think for 400 or 500 years, Europe, or actually since the Roman Empire fell, in many ways Europe was just fighting amongst itself, but it's kind of unified in the European Union as a civilization, and now is trying to protect itself from the Islamic world, the Russian threats that are coming in from the east. And it's interesting to watch as a historian. But
it's not easy process. You see what's going on with European, all the Brexit situation. The nationalists in Central Europe. What do you think about this?
Well, it's certainly, Europe has always been, due to geography and language and culture, probably the least unified civilization out there, compared to like the Chinese one, which is much more monolithic. Obviously there's differences in different parts of regions of China, and the countries around China would certainly say that no, we're not part of Chinese civilization and don't support it. But there was actually a very interesting historical thesis that the reason Europe became so powerful was it was so disunified that the competition, like the startup ecosystem of nations, created this like really, really powerful innovations in warfare and technology.
I heard the story that Max Weber wrote about capitalism and Protestant religion that made this.
Well, sitting in Catholic Poland, I think we'd have to dispute the Protestant side of things, but I think you would also say that the not necessarily what the Protestant Reformation did in Europe was created a lot of dynamic, fractured groups of people that had a certain philosophy. But I think Poland and other Catholic countries have certainly done quite well in terms of innovation and producing great things during this period too. So I think it's just more about, in Europe, a culture of competition and innovation that was necessary for national survival, and some countries didn't survive the whole time during this period. Poland obviously had some problems during that period and came out of it amazingly as a new country again. But that's the spirit of Europe is it's a startup community. Entire countries are startups in Europe. They come and go, and they go bankrupt and come back, and because of that competitive nature, I think we've developed some very strong technologies, institutions, and people that make up Europe. So that's the historical thesis, at least I've heard some people talk about.
Okay, I'll change this because we finish talking about the politics a little bit, but I want to come back a little bit to business, because I'd like to know what is exactly James Cook Publishing doing, because I know that you named the company after your brothers. Because your younger brother died. Yes. Yeah. I heard the story on some of the podcasts. It was heartbreaking, and it was that's why heartbreaking, because it happened exactly in the moment that you almost lost everything. Can you tell the story? Is it a problem for you? I hope not.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I started James Cook Publishing when I moved to Poland. It was named after my brother who'd passed away, and my passion's always been around ideas, and to me, ideas and storytelling are really important. I've always read books since I was little. My dad and I kind of bonded over our shared love of history and reading, and my little brother also was very much a Renaissance man. He loved to read, loved to study physics and any kind of knowledge, and was a composer. So what I'm really passionate about is helping great ideas get out there, and unfortunately in this world, or fortunately, however you want to you frame it, it is what it is. Great ideas don't always spread without a little bit of help, and the idea of the publishing house is to help great ideas spread, and great ideas that are positive to the world. There can be some very powerful ideas that are negative, and one of the things that I'm a big believer in is there's something more to life than just us. There's a greater good that needs to be served, and I think life is only really great personally and for people, and when they are not just self-focused but focused on helping other people. So my idea with the publishing house is to help great people that help other people have better lives and better understandings of their life and better futures, get ideas. So I work with some clients who are I think have great ideas, help them get them out there
to the English-speaking global.
To the English-speaking market, and I like to do it in the digital medium. I help people with video production, do their videos. I like to do very documentary style, story-based videos.
Can you give some example of a client? Or?
Yeah, so right now I'm working with Peter Sage, who's a UK business coach. He runs a business school, Sage Business School in the United Kingdom, and he is an amazing storyteller, amazing speaker. And his mission is to help global entrepreneurship. And global entrepreneurship, his idea, which I happen to agree with, which is why he's my client, is that the world is going through a massive disruption. Most of the jobs that we're doing right now are going to go away. Driving, self-driving cars and robotics and artificial intelligence are going to kill most of the jobs that are
farming, everything.
Everything. Drones, airline pilots. I mean, no job is safe right now, and the future of the world depends on a new entrepreneurship class rising up and developing the jobs of the future. And this isn't new in history. I mean, in 200 years ago, almost 95% of people were working in fields, and then the Industrial Revolution happened, and then everyone had to find out what to do. And that's just what's going on right now is a repeat of that. But I think it's a little bit faster now. I think it's a little bit more dramatic in the time scale that it's happening. And so Peter's idea is to lead kind of a global renaissance in entrepreneurship and a movement to do that. And he's teaching entrepreneurs, so I do the marketing for that. I run the email campaigns, run the sales letters, all the different things that I did in the Army in a way, communication plans and, ideas. Sometimes running these online marketing campaigns feels a lot like a military operation with all the different things.
Sales letters that don't save life, but
exactly.
Save pocket.
Well, sales letters that hopefully change lives and
well said.
Sometimes life doesn't feel very fulfilling when you're thinking a certain way, and if you can put a new idea in people's heads and change their life, it's like saving a life in a way, because ideas matter. And I think the way that we look at life and our outlook on life, and how the story we tell ourselves about life, the bad stories versus the good stories we could tell ourselves are important. So teaching people through marketing and through a positive messenger like Peter to tell better stories and come up with a new, I'll give you an example. So you're podcasting in Poland, and it's all new and exciting here. And I love seeing that energy because, I teach marketing here in Poland, and it's brand new and exciting to a lot of people. Whereas in America, everyone knows about it, and it's like this old skill that people are kind of sick of hearing about. And I love the energy in Poland of, lighting people up with this stuff that to me is not new coming from America, but in Poland it's brand new fertile ground. And seeing entrepreneurs here like Patty and different people that I've been able to teach come up with new possibilities and different stories and ideas is really exciting. And it can be quite powerful. And that's the beauty of Poland, and sometimes the curse is there's so many things that could happen here because they haven't happened yet. But then there's this pessimism that because it hasn't happened here, it's never going to happen. So there's this huge possibility. And I feel like the people in Poland as a collective group have to decide, what story are we going to tell ourselves about what's possible, and given our natural pessimism and things that come out of this culture because of history.
There is a part of Poland that are whiners.
Yeah, well, given the natural pessimism and that exists here.
It's from communism,
for good reason.
It's not Polish.
It's not just communism. It's the entire experience that this country's had. It's been very tough. Before communism was a horrible war, Holocaust and things like that happened here. So. Do we dare to tell a great story about what's possible in this country, and do we choose to believe it? And that's what I think is really exciting about Poland is the blank slate over here compared to some of the things that are well worn in the United States, and some of maybe even the pessimism or the fatigue of the United States around ideas that I think are right to take off in Poland and in this part of the world. So that's the cool part about it, and that's why I like supporting people like you who are bringing new ideas into the ecosystem around digital marketing and podcasting and things like that, because you have a chance to do it right here, whereas there's a lot of things I'm very critical of about the way the Americans do it.
What is the name of my podcast? Lepiej Teraz, better now.
Better now. Well, that's awesome, and
but when?
There's no better time than now, and I think so many people are stuck living in the past, and saying why they can't do something, or they're worried about the future. You know, people are either stuck in the past or worried about the
Yes.
future, but, you know, right now is here, and it's the only thing we have.
Yeah.
It's the only thing we can control.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, you can't change the past. You can't change what's happened to you. But what you can do is change what you're doing right now by telling a different story about what's happened to you. And that's a very interesting distinction is facts happen. You were born, you know, my brother passed away, I left the army, and those all happened to me. But what do I choose to tell myself about that? You know, am I going to say my life is horrible because these things happen? And I've done that, and I felt sorry for myself, I think for way too long after some bad things happened in my life. But now deciding, hey, I'm going to tell myself a different story about that now. And hey, this is a tough thing that happened to me, but it's going to make me better and make my family better and, you know, those around me better. So I think that's the challenge we all have, is to tell ourselves a better story. Don't lie. I mean, things happen and you can't change what's happened, but you can attach different meaning to what's happened and tell a better story and live a better now and not worry about the future, because the future, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, history's taught me from reading it that war could break out and everything that we plan on is going to change. And, you know, this part of the world,
planning. No plan can survive.
Yeah, no plan survives first contact with the enemy is what we said in the army. But, you know, these things are easy to say and really, really hard to do. You know, don't let the past control you, and don't let the future stop you, and live in the now. So that's a great podcast name, and
Thanks.
You know, I hope that you're successful in teaching people your philosophy on that. So appreciate that.
I also
that message.
appreciate. I have a question, because I started a conversation about mentoring, because I wanted to ask you a question. How do you guide your mentees?
Yeah.
Well, I heard about obituary. Can you tell me something more? Because it was like, that was the reason I wanted to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, well, the obituary episode that Patty, maybe some people are watching this just to figure out who's this crazy guy that made Patty write his own obituary. But it's something that I did in so many words. When I was 22, I was forced to apply for the Rhodes Scholarship, which is this big scholarship, and they wanted you to tell what you're going to do with your life in order to deserve this amazing education and free scholarship that they're going to give you. And I had to spend about 6 months agonizing over a 500-word essay about what I wanted to do with my life. And it was a very painful process, but it was probably one of the most rewarding things I did. And then life happened. I joined the Army. I got busy, and in my early 30s, when I figured out I didn't want to stay in the Army my whole life, I reached this kind of existential crisis about what do I want to do with my life. And that was a subject of a TEDx talk that I did. And that was a really tough time for me, because I think a lot of people in life are never quite figure out or allow themselves to be honest with themselves about what they really want to do with life. And I know for a while I was hiding from it, and I finally looked at it, and that's what kind of made it very, very clear to me that I needed to leave the Army and pursue my dreams of being in the digital publishing world. And because I'm passionate about storytelling, I believe that, you know, helping reinvent the future of publishing and creating a better network for information distribution that helps people with their lives is important, and it's something that I'm going to be involved with. And I have no idea whether that's going to be successful or not, or, you know, I'm still on the journey. But one thing I can tell you is I've had a lot of hard moments over the last 3 years after I've left the Army. Going into business on your own, not having one succeed, getting back up, having to start over is hard. But what's kept me going through all of this, what kept me going when my little brother passed away, what kept me going when the business didn't work out, what kept me going, all the things that didn't work out the way you wish they would have worked out, was knowing that I'm pursuing something, a goal that I may never reach, but I'm pursuing something that I'm passionate about, and I enjoy what I'm doing, and I enjoy doing that, and that makes it worth it. And
you're doing something that you will pay for.
Yeah, I ultimately, would you pay to do what you're doing right now? And I think that's a question when you get into business. So many people start a business because they think it's going to make them money, and they think that no one else has thought of it, and they're gonna make money because they've got a good idea. But I always like to ask a business owner, would you pay to do that? Would you pay to hang out with the type of people that your business is designed to help, or do you hate those people? You know, ultimately, you get paid when you add value to other people's lives, and you can fool people for a while, but eventually, if you're not adding value to other people, you're going to go out of business. And even if you do add value to other people, if you don't get the economics right and all the different things you need to do in business right, you'll still go out of business. I've added value to people's lives and gone out of business before, I know that. So when I got into the mentorship game or coaching business with Patty, I was quite honored that someone like Patty would ask me to do that. But I have mentors too, you know, and I think everyone...
Shremko was your mentor?
Yeah, well, James Shremko was in digital marketing. General McMaster was my military mentor. I consider my uncle a bit of a spiritual life mentor. I consider many different people in my life business mentors and different things. And I think ultimately... I've got a few years on Patty, that's it. I've got a few more life experiences than Patty, but there's plenty of things I can learn from him. But ultimately, the reason people pay for mentorship is it gives them something to hold themselves accountable to. So when you pay for something, you value it. And when you value something, you try it. And one of the things I tried to do with Patty, and anyone that pays me for coaching, is to look at them and where they are and help them, you know, get clear on, you know, what they want to do with their lives, whether they're passionate about it. And that's just something that I noticed when I was speaking to Patty is, well, okay, you want to learn this and this and this, but wait a minute, what do you really want to do with your life? And if until you get clear with where you're heading, I'm afraid to tell you how to do the things you say you want to do, because maybe you're going to go down a path that's not fulfilling to you. So I just asked Patty to do something that I did when I was 22, was get clear on what I wanted to do with my life. And you may not ever even have the chance to pursue it, but at least you know that that's what you're passionate about. And that's kind of the way I gave it. And I had cadets do this at West Point who came to me after they got in trouble and needed some mentorship, and I made them
500 words life story.
Well, no, I made these cadets write instead of 500 words life story, I made them write their future based on what would happen if they didn't fix their problems that caused them to get in trouble, or their future that would happen if they did fix it. Like, what are the two different paths in life?
Best case scenario and the worst case scenario.
Yeah, what's the best case and worst case scenario for your life? And I did this with some cadets, and I found it was very powerful because they really had to look at themselves and say, what's driving me to do these things that got me in trouble? You know, what are the things that I hope I can do in life if I go down a better path? So we had them do this, and all of the cadets that I mentored, there were 3 of them, have told me since then, that's the best thing I ever did. I'm so glad that I got in trouble so that I had to go through this mentorship program with you. And the most powerful part of it was this obituary that I made him write, which is a bit dramatic because obviously facing your own death in the future is a bit dramatic, but I wanted to make it meaningful to them and make it hard. And when I made it hard and they spent some time in it and struggled with it, they got a lot out of it, and I think they all had a very positive change in their life when they did that. So when Patty came to me and I noticed that he was struggling with he had these goals in business and what he wanted to do, I said, well, let's take a step back, and what do you really want to do with your life? And if we do that, well, why don't you just do this obituary that I used to make cadets do? And I had Patty do it, and he had a great attitude towards it and decided that, wow, this is cool, and I think it's been really helpful. I mean, we just had a meeting today where he gave me his ideas, and I think much more important than the actual story that you write down is the discovery you make about yourself when you write it. And I like to tell Patty that thing that you've wrote, or that dream life that you want to live, is never going to happen. But the process of writing it and forcing yourself to imagine what you want to do and then putting it down is very powerful. But understand that just like in the military, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. In business, no business plan that you present to investors ever works out like you think it's going to work out.
Nobody is using business plans.
No, well, look, plans are worthless, but planning is everything, right? So you have a plan for your life, you have a dream. Just because you never reach your dream doesn't mean you're not successful. I don't think there's anyone in life who does all the things they dream about as a kid. I think that life is far from perfect, and people never get what they want, and things are never perfect. But it doesn't mean you should give up hope, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't dream for better future and dream for, a better version of yourself to come through. Just don't let your happiness and your things depend on achieving that, because it's not about where you end up, it's about the journey. Enjoy the now, enjoy the journey, enjoy what you're doing in life. And as long as you know you're going towards something that you're passionate about and that you love and that you pay to do, and you're not worried about, I think that's when life gets good. And it's never going to work out the way you want, and there's going to be setbacks and failures and hard times and tragedies and things like that. But it's much more meaningful when you're on that path. And I think that, if I can help a few people like Patty and other people do that, that's cool, and that gives a lot more meaning to my life too. So it's kind of a cool position to be in. I'm honored that someone like Patty or other people would have me help them with that. So
thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being my guest. I never expected I can throw all these questions to garbage, because I never use you, so I prepared, but I didn't use it because...
Well, I will tell you that as a host, you certainly proved my thesis right there, which is a plan is awesome, because you knew so many things about what you wanted to ask, but ultimately we didn't follow a lot of it. But that's what plans are for, is to get you ready for a wild journey and be comfortable with what doesn't happen. So you've done a great job as a host preparing. You certainly prepare far better than I do.
You forget about yourself.
For my podcasts, thanks for reminding me of some things that I'd forgotten about for a while, and I hope it was helpful to some of your guests,
I'm sure.
Your listeners, and look forward to helping you out.
This is a great story, especially all these stories. Basically, all these stories I will listen to again, and I really, really appreciate that you came to my podcast. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for having me, and thank you again for those listening for supporting A Better Now and making Poland, a better place to be, and the digital marketing scene and the podcasting community. So best of luck to you and your audience going forward. Look forward to supporting you.
Thanks. Bye.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
All right.